Good afternoon. This is the asynchronous video vidcast to support session 3 of Rigor is Not a Four-Letter Word. As part of this 4-series workshop or 4-session workshop, we've been reading about different aspects of Rigor, including Cheryl Gray's work around getting Rigor right, David Page, Sean Sizemore's work around this idea of institutional rigor. And today we're adding to that Barbara Blackburn's rigor and assessment in the classroom, as well as taking CTL's interpretation of Cheryl Gray's Getting Rigor Right article and looking at that rubric. The last session, we spent some time discussing Cheryl Gray's work and Sizemore's work, thinking about how we approach rigor systematically. As part of this session, we're going to begin thinking about it. We want to reflect on what does Barbara Blackburn say. I really like Barbara Blackburn's definition of rigor. It moves beyond just the responsibility of the student to work hard. It's how do we set students up to work hard, and it's about how do we provide those opportunities. And one of the things that I think is really important is that she mentions right off the bat, to get to rigor, you've got to have high engagement. In fact, if you look for rigor, research into rigor outside of the United States, it doesn't exist. They talk about engagement, and that's the part where CTL believes in this and really believes that how you engage students and the kinds of opportunities you give students is really critical. I think that goes along very well with Barbara Blackburn's discussion in this article. We think about having high expectations, and I really like, I think there's some opportunity here to really think about what does having high expectations look like in the classroom and at the school level, and how do we support that? But it's also, if you're going to have these high expectations, how do you support students in being successful? And that's process. How do you support them in understanding how to tackle those more complex tasks, and how do you help them understand how to manage those complex tasks? And again, those are processes, and we have a very strong belief that if you have strong processes in place, you can get to that rigorous instruction. So I look forward to your discussion of the article. I picked out 2 pieces that I thought were interesting to me. What are the mediating steps that we use in our classrooms to support students in really getting to those high levels and thinking about the content more than just quick half-second or 2-second answers. If we're going to ask good, high-quality questions, then it's important on us to give students time to think, and giving them processes to help them organize and consolidate their thinking so they can answer them out loud. And so those mediating steps are something that I always think about as something that we can have an impact on quickly. Helping teachers slow down to get better answers, and will give them a sense of efficacy as they ask those better questions. Another component of this, and this is a really critical part of rigor, and she really talks about it as an after rigor, and that is the 7 principles of effective assessment. I won't go into it extensively here, but you can, as you read the article, I want you to think about what is something that you've been focusing on in your classroom. On page 3, she talks about truly effective assessment transforms the teaching and learning experience. This transformation is not simply provided. Teachers and students use that information to improve. And I think that's a different take on assessment than we see in a lot of classrooms. It's not formative assessment that we focus on, but it is summative assessment. And Marzano is very clear in his research that as soon as you put that grade on it, student thinking stops. And we want to move beyond that kind of assessment. Interestingly enough, I think the COVID-19 pandemic has really pushed teachers in getting a better grasp on good formative assessment, because as we think about standards-based grading, it lends itself very nicely to this idea of we're not there yet, but as we work, these are the things we want to keep working on. That better feedback gets better results in the long run. So as you reflect the reading, there's a survey here, reflection survey, which will bring you to this survey, and it's a very short 3-question survey. Give us a little bit of reflections, and then The next part is if you click on this link, it'll take you to the answers. And I want you to go in here. You can't change the answers, but I want you to comment on the answers. So to comment, you click on the answer you want to click on, that you want to comment on, and you insert a comment for that. Type in your comment, and then you'll have added your comment to somebody's thinking. Really kind of pushing, extending somebody's thinking, asking some good clarifying questions. We want to see how much depth we can get in our conversation around rigor. Going back to this idea or staying with this idea of rigorous instruction, we started a Padlet for rigor on a continuum, and that's something that Paige and Sizemore really talked about. I want you to go into this Padlet and add some more instructional approaches that have rigor in them. But the next part of this is also to think about, if rigor is on a continuum, how do we move somebody who is at the lower end of rigor to not necessarily full-on project-based learning kind of rigor, but how do we move them along that continuum? What are some specific things that we can work with a teacher to improve on? And I think that helps us understand that rigor is not a yes or no, but it's a continuum, and how do we can always improve. So if we don't have the rigor we want right now, let's think about moving it a little bit, and then we can continue. Once we learn how to move it, then we can continue to move it further and further along that continuum. So I've added some ideas, and I want you to come in and add some more instructional approaches that you see in your building or in your experience that are rigorous. You need to be logged in to be able to comment on this, but you should have a comment here. You simply click on it, give it a title, and write in your description, and it'll show up just like mine do. And then you can also click here to add a comment. Commenting is open for all of you. If you have trouble with that, just let me know, and I will make sure that you get access to it. The third final component of this part of the rigor is that playlist, and I want you to watch 2 of the videos and really think about how these videos are pushing rigor from the perspective of the research that we've now read, all 3 articles. And go to this feedback form and add your thinking here. Let us know what video you chose, and then how does this video push the idea of rigor from the perspective of our research, and then how can or will you use this video or this idea to support increasing rigor with your staff. And then the last component of this session really is this rigor rubric. We've gone through and taken the thinking from Cheryl Gray and given you a rubric to look at. We know there are 7 components. I'm not asking you to go all the way through. This is a 13-page rubric. It's very detailed. What I want you to do as part of this work is to take one section that makes sense for you and your school, whether it's collaboration, instruction, assessment. You pick the one where you feel like you either want to make your focus or you have a strong approach already in place, and do an analysis. What's important here is not where you are, whether you're beginning, developing, or accomplished, but it's that 4th column, and that's the evidence. What evidence can you provide that your students or your teachers are achieving this level of rigor? This one component, so it's not everything, but we want to make sure that we're being very detailed in how we're approaching this analysis. Here we go. So for instance, if you were looking at collaboration in the school, and if you're focusing on improvement, let's take that first row that goes across. The groups meet to address curriculum alignment, but we don't have a strategic process when revisiting the curriculum throughout the school year. So we met and we put the curriculum in place, but do we revisit it? So if we're not revisiting it, how do we keep it live and keep it active? So that we may be beginning because we don't have that piece yet. My evidence might be that we do meet in June, yearly, and we revise, and as teachers teach, they give revisions to the curriculum. It could be a piece that we move a little further along because there is a system in place piece. The pieces of work in the school involving curriculum instruction and assessment, i.e. student work analysis, other professional development, are sometimes used to inform mapping process, but not consistently. So in other words, if we have a map in place, are we using all of the analysis of that to make sure that that map is timely, that is giving students enough time to think, covering the important characteristics that important standards of that grade level, of that content. And then accomplished would be all instructional meetings, grade level, department, leadership involved work that informs the curriculum mapping process. And there's a system in place to ensure ongoing alignment. It's not that we have a binder where everything is done, but it's a living document. And what does that look like? Evidence would be meeting minutes. It would be links to the curriculum to show how teachers are adding and changing what they're doing, to show that it's been updated to reflect what's actually happening in the school. Obviously, with the COVID pandemic and not being in classrooms for this last 6 weeks, we probably don't have any updates right now, but it is something that we want to keep thinking. This experience, though, should impact next year. One, because we want to reflect on what gaps we might have in place, but we also know that there's the potential that we may not be in school all the time, beginning in November when the virus is expected to rebound a little bit from the heat as it cools. So we want to make sure that we've adjusted our instruction and our processes and our approaches to set our students up for success long term. So there should be some very intentional reflection going on. I look forward to this part of it. So remember, this isn't due in that fourth session. It is, as part of that fourth session, we're going to really talk about what you're finding. This is where you're going to make your own screencast and share that. What does it look like from your perspective, and what's the evidence, but then what's my plan to address that? So I look forward to your comments, and I look forward to your reflections, and I will be monitoring all of the email and all the forums. So